Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeevan, and I'm a researcher at Social Science Baha. On behalf of Social Science Baha, I would like to welcome all of you to the 94th Baha Lecture Series, which is organized by Social Science Baha. And I would also like to welcome Karl-Heinz Krämer to the series, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, some of the latest studies indicate about democratic backsliding with various forms. But Nepal has been undergoing a very interesting time in terms of democratization, transformations, and establishment of new form of governance in the country. And as we all know, Nepal is also celebrating the year of 2017 as the year of elections. And according to recent electoral laws in the country, there has been introduction of new electoral systems in the countries with the provision of 3% votes under proportional representation system and at least one seat under the direct electoral system. And just yesterday, we had the elections in about 32 districts of the country. And successful holding of elections and having elected representatives in different layers of government have generated hopes and expectations among many Nepalese folks in the country. It is often expected that these elections, as the process of formal implementation of new Constitution 2015, will institutionalize the achievements made by what we call the popular movement, the Jana Andolan II. Yet, for many of us who are concerned about and interested in country's socio-political transformation, there are many curiosities and puzzling questions still remains to be answered, which are very much related to the dynamics and possible future directions of country's social political development. For example, what does the new electoral system that country has adopted imply for formation of electoral alliances and unification of political parties in Nepal? We've seen recently that there has been alignment and realignment in the countries in the pretext of the elections that the country is experiencing. And in turn, what does it indicate for the sustainability and party system, stability of democracy and rule of law, and type of social and economic policies that the country is going to adopt after the outcome of the elections? And equally, and maybe more important for some of us, what does this mean for ensuring the agenda of inclusion that was very much politicized, and that was one of the major agenda of People's Movement of 2006, and including so many other social movements that the country experienced, especially in post-1990 period. Against this background, based on personal experiences and his long research about the politics in Nepal, today Karl will discuss about how political parties will work out on realizing the projected closer cooperations that they promised. When he does that, I hope he will also try to address some of the questions that I just outlined, which is very pertinent to Nepal's political future. With this, let me introduce Karl-Heinz Krämer. He is a political scientist who obtained his doctoral degree from South Asia Institute at University of Heidelberg with a study on ethnicity and national integration in Nepal. His interest turned to Nepal studies when he met his wife, who is here somewhere in the middle of the audience today, Lakpa Dolma Serpa from Solukhumbu in 1973. At what is called, since 1983, he has provided some courses at his institute which is related to Nepal. So some people interested to come to Nepal for study benefit a lot from each course. Currently, he is also editor of Nepal E, the Journal of German Nepal Friendship Association in Cologne. He runs several websites on Nepal, and it's about Nepal's politics and Sherpas, especially nepalresearch.org. I've also benefited a lot from the particular website cited here. Dr. Krämer has published a number of books on Nepal's politics and history in both in Nepal and German. Amongst them, The Long Way to Democracy, Ethnicity and National Integration in Nepal. And he's also co-authored with his wife numerous book chapters and journal articles. So I would like to welcome Dr. Krämer to deliver today's lecture. But before he starts, may I request all of you to switch off your mobile phone before it starts. So welcome, Kendra.
Thank you very much for this nice and extensive introduction. And I will hope to answer some of your questions in the course of my talk. Many thanks also for the invitation here to speak at Social Science Bar. I take it as an honor. Maybe one right at the beginning, English is not my mother tongue, and so I already beg your pardon for some probable mistakes, linguistic mistakes I may make in my talk. It's not easy for me to talk on a theme like elections, parties and alliances here in Nepal, especially in such a high emotional political phase in between the two election days. Therefore, I have tried to prepare my talk very carefully, and I hope you can understand that I have to keep close to my script to avoid misunderstandings. I've been the son-in-law of this country for about 45 years now, and so I observe the developments in Nepal, the country that is so dear to my heart, maybe only half as a foreigner and half as a Zwain or Tzak as the Sherpas call me. I nevertheless promise to try to discuss my impressions as neutral as possible. My intention is simply to address some things that especially move me in respect to recent political developments. I will try to avoid the mentioning of names of political personalities as far as possible, and to put the emphasis on structural aspects instead. Nevertheless, please take my following comments as my very personal impressions and deliberations. After a few introductory remarks, I will shortly refer to the new constitution and how it was achieved, before I turn to the elections, especially the local elections. Finally, I will talk about the recent party political developments and, most of all, the formation of electoral alliances. 2017 is a year of elections for Nepal. To leave no room for doubt, all these elections are much needed to provide legitimation to legislative and executive under the new constitution. Local elections particularly had been overdue for 20 years after the last local elections in 1997, the people at last could elect their political representatives on the local level. The elections due in 2002, as we all know, have become a victim of conflict situation at the time. Even after 2006, the political parties had for a longer time not really shown interest in holding local elections. After years of a certain kind of inactiveness, the politicians today see themselves on the home straight to fulfill the provision of the Constitution that the federal setups, the federal system, has to be implemented before 21st of January 2018. They make believe that elections alone on all three levels already fulfill this request. They fail, in my view, to recognize that the creation of legal rights under the new political setup should have been the first step, that they should have created the necessary infrastructure on the provincial and local levels before elections could take place there. The concurrent power sharing between the different levels of the new federal system should also have been cleared before any elections. Besides, it would have been necessary to schedule the fiscal resources for all three levels. The annual budget should then have correspondingly provided the means for provinces and local levels. These are only a few shortcomings that I see in the forefront of the elections. All this should have been resolved and settled before the parties started to nominate candidates for elections. But the nomination of candidates should not have been made by the respective central level of the party, as it seems to have happened once again. Instead, the local party level should have decided on their respective candidates from among themselves. This would have been a democratic procedure. Now the divisional clientele system has been retained with factions around rival leaders at the top of each party, with diverse coteries, patronizations, and corrupt practices. On the other side, has the exclusion of traditionally disadvantaged groups been continued. The exclusion has even been tightened by the rigorous reduction of MPs that are to be elected through the proportional representation system in a socially inclusive way. I see this negative constitutional change as a voluntary procedure by the male high caste party aides. At this point, some other remarks on the new constitution are necessary that have influenced the political events in the past 2 years. The new constitution of 2015 was to be based on Jana Andolan II, as well as a number of corresponding agreements between diverse political parties and social groups. This had been set out in writing by the interim constitution of 15th of January 2007. It ruled, for example, how the Constituent Assembly had to be elected. Concretely, it prescribed an appropriate social composition of the CA to guarantee that all social groups of the country could advocate their respective concerns in the Constituent Assembly and accordingly participate in the drafting of the new Constitution. Article 63 of the interim Constitution demanded that the system of social inclusiveness should not only be respected regarding the 335 MPs that had to be elected through the proportional representation system, but that the parties should also apply it while nominating candidates under the FPTP system. We all know that the latter had not even happened rudimentarily in both the Constituent Assembly elections. On the other side, would the constitutional prescriptions regarding social inclusion only mean that contrarily to the functioning of a normal parliament under a multi-party system, the voting in the Constituent Assembly should at least in greater parts not follow party lines but along social interests that were to be represented by the respectively elected MPs. The introduction of a socially inclusive system had been missed in 1990, and this should have been different under the new constitution. In my view, this worked quite well during the first 1.5 years of the first Constituent Assembly, when inclusively composed committees worked on different aspects of the new constitution. Latest in January 2010, after these committees had presented their respective suggestions for the new constitution, the leading politicians grabbed the task of constitution writing. suggestions of the different committees have never been discussed in the Constituent Assembly. I had the impression that the party elites had become aware of the fact that the implementation of the suggestions that had been presented by the committees, at least those suggestions that were related to aspects like social inclusion, equal rights and federalism, inevitably would have led to a loss of their traditional powers and privileges. I see this procedure by the party leaders already as a grave violation of the interim constitution. It has once again been topped when this socially extremely non-inclusive circle of so-called leaders drafted the new constitution in 2015 and forced the MPs of their respective parties to vote for this draft along party lines and disallowed any objections against it. This led, in my view, the basic idea of social inclusion as it had been prescribed by the interim constitution ad absurdum. I see the demonstrations and blockades that followed in the first place as reasonable reactions by those disappointed. They degenerated with a degree of violence from protesters as well as security forces, and they were raised to a special political level when India supported them from outside. On balance, it had become clear that there were greater sections of society that had expressed their dissatisfaction with the new constitution. This was especially true for the Thai region, but also, for example, for the women, after all, more than half of the population, who saw their rights and position not much improved. The minimal constitutional amendment of January 2016 was not more than an eyewash. It did not help to correct numerous negative, vague, and partly continuously discriminating passages of the Constitution. This caused, in my view, the disappointed groups to demand for another, this time fundamental, revise of the new Constitution. The handling of the demand for constitutional amendments became an important tool in the power struggles of the three big parties after the replacement of the old government latest. As long as the Maoist Center had been the minor coalition partner of the UML, it had shown not much interest in the demands of Madhesi and Janajati parties. This changed abruptly when its chairman got the chance to become prime minister for a period of 9 months as the minority party in a coalition government with the Nepali Congress. This alliance could only come about if it at least got support from the Thai parties. So Nepali Congress and Maoist Center secured their votes by promising to discuss and to put to vote the demanded constitutional changes in Parliament. Such constitutional amendments require a 2/3 majority, and everybody who could calculate a bit knew that such amendment would only be possible when it was supported by the now oppositional UML. Annoyed about the breach of trust by the Maoist Center, the UML took up a hard position rejecting any support to constitutional changes. The party even claimed that such amendments were not necessary at all, the new constitution would be optimal and only had to be implemented. The situation became exciting again in early 2017 when the governing parties managed to participate in a number of smaller parties by offering positions. The needed 2/3 majority was on a knife edge. In this situation, UML pressed ahead with the suggestion to hold local elections immediately. If necessary, one could consider constitutional amendments later. One has to call in mind that the UML had never talked about local elections as long as it was itself at the helm. Such elections, by the way, already could have taken place parallel to the Constituent Assembly elections in 2008 and 2013 without greater problems, in my opinion. The leading politicians had simply not been interested at that time. The immediate holding of local elections was an argument that could not be opposed by the other parties, especially in view of the fact that the constitution demanded the comprehensive implementation of the federal state, including all needed laws, institutions, and, of course, elections on all three levels of the new system. Preparatory works for the restructuring of the local level had already been in progress for some time. It was decided to force this restructuring process centrally and to hold elections on the basis of the new structure, what was to be seen rationally. But since the new structure was fine-tuned for the next several months, the parallel preparations of the local elections became a complicated task for the election commission. Time and again, it had to make adjustments whenever the top politicians came up with a new idea. What was even more serious, there remained not enough time to educate the voters on the complicated election system. It later was reflected in the election results with 10 to 20% party invalid vote. This is a figure that can hardly be termed as fair elections. Serious as well was the reaction of the Thai parties. They once again felt forsaken and cheated. In their view, the ruling parties made common cause with the UNL and forgot their earlier promises. The big three parties now claim to decide on possible constitutional changes as demanded by the Thai parties only after holding local elections. The local elections gave the parties a first opportunity to explore their chances in the elections on the provincial and central level that had to be held later. Without any doubt, these later elections were of greater personal importance for the party leaders. So, what lessons can be learned from the process and results of the local elections? To start with some positive impressions, the people showed similar enthusiasm as I had seen during the first parliamentary elections after the democratization in 1991. This was, for example, proved by a very high voter turnout and a relatively peaceful course of the elections, apart from some incidents in Nepal. On the other side, I've got numerous negative impressions that party had to do with the actions of government, parties and administration. I will only mention a few aspects. I saw it as negative that changes in the local restructuring were introduced when the preparation of the elections was already underway, partly even contrary to decisions of the Supreme Court. Such a greater part political and volatile changes caused big problems to the election commission. It also proved the extreme dependency of this commission from the government. The repeatedly changed decisions to hold the local elections in finally 3 ballots must be mentioned in this context. Partly, the electoral rolls were incomplete even when the election commission had to finalize them. Based on this, we must ask, for example, why more men than women were registered, even though the population statistics provide a different view. Negative was also that millions of labor migrants did not get the chance to vote despite a contrary ruling of the constitution. This excluded an enormous share of the younger generation. I think it is also not correct that persons who are on duty during the elections are deprived of their voting right. The state has the duty to provide alternatives, for example by postal vote. It also violates the principle of equality that is guaranteed by the Constitution if persons from special and professional groups are disallowed to candidate in elections. It cannot be that persons have to give up a secure occupational position only to candidate in elections. In my view, it would be sufficient if they left their jobs temporarily vacant in case they are really elected. This, for example, was obviously not a problem when in 2013 Chief Justice Karl-Heinz was made Prime Minister by the party leaders. The great share of women elected in the local elections must be seen very positive. The The election law guaranteed a share of 40% of women in the ward committees. One may only ask if it is optimal to prescribe a share of 20% of Dalit women countrywide. Without any doubt, Dalit women are among the most disadvantaged sections of society, but there are areas with very low Dalit population. Maybe one could adapt this ruling better to the respective local situation and introduce a positive discrimination of women from other traditionally disadvantaged social groups if the number of Dalit population is very low. The patriarchal thinking of the predominantly male circles of party leaders became obvious when they nominated the candidates for the offices of mayor or chairperson, respectively their representatives. The election law prescribes that the parties have to nominate candidates of different gender for both positions. The consequence was that the male leaders overwhelmingly nominated men for the chief position and women for the deputy post. The confusing ballot papers proved to be a major obstacle to fair elections. This problem was further aggravated by the fact that the election commission did not have any time to explain the system to the voters. The ballot papers in urban areas with their numerous election candidates and often similar symbols were hardly to comprehend by the people. This was further aggravated by the ruling that only those parties that had been elected into the Constituent Assembly in 2013 were the uniform elections in the countrywide. This discriminated against new and small parties. The parties had to be reproached that they published manifestos ahead of the elections that rarely dealt with the concerns of the local population. Mostly, one got the impression that the parties were talking about parliamentary elections. At the time of the local elections, neither the future tasks of the local units within the federal system were clear, nor the available resources, but the election candidates nevertheless party-made utopian promises. I also could not avoid the impression that the big ruling that the big parties voluntarily disregarded the concerns of other political groups, especially in the Tarai, and thus provoked their election boycott. Such boycott, by the way, is the greatest stupidity in a democratic system, since the respective parties deprive themselves of the chance to advocate their concerns in a democratic way and to possibly change the system from within. The consequences of the initial election boycott by the Tarai parties can hardly be estimated. The first round of voting took place in mountain districts where these parties did not play any role. In the second ballot, only two of the more important Tarai parties participated, and this only in a reduced way. It was only in the third round of voting in Province 2 that the Tarai parties really campaigned, and they were very successful, winning to altogether 54 of 136 mayor positions in the province. The Congress became the strongest of the big parties with 40 mayors. The CPN-UML became the countrywide most successful party in the local elections. Like no other party, it had identified with the Nepali nationalism of the Paha tradition and adopted a hard course against the Tarai parties. This, on the other side, had the consequence that it suffered a crushing defeat, winning only 18 mayor positions in Province 2. Another reason for the success of the UML may have been that it was the party that had emphasized the necessity of immediate local elections. But the party has also profited from the strange ruling coalition of Congress and Maoist Center. In terms of their basic attitudes, the latter parties have not many things in common. I cannot help feeling that this coalition was primarily based on the power ambitions of their leaders. First, the chairman of the Maoist Center became Prime Minister for the irrational period of 9 months, and then the chairman of the Nepali Congress for about the same time, even though both had already sufficiently failed as prime ministers. There had been a lot of dissatisfaction over this coalition, especially within the Nepali Congress. The government also disappointed the Tara groups because it did not keep its promises and it helped little that Congress and Maoist Center Party concluded electoral alliances. The poor performance of the two big ruling parties in the local elections may have been the main effector for the breaking up of the coalition government in the immediate run-up to the elections on the provincial and national level. This breach marked the beginning of a turbulent phase in which Nepal's party political landscape was thoroughly messed up. I see many things still in progress. We will have to wait if these are durable changes or if it is only a flash in the pan and the old situation will be restored in the aftermath of the elections. I would therefore like to be very careful about my following comments. In part, the current alliances are so irrational, in my view, that I do not give them a permanent chance. But we must also be aware that these alliances, however they may look in the end, are an important preliminary stage to a more reasonable party system in Nepal. The country needs political stability. This can only be reached with the current system, if the current system with its vast number of parties is ended. Drastically less parties also mean less incentives to party splits and over more power ambitions of political leaders. Splinter groups would not have any perspective in a system with only a few parties that should then differ more in content. The 3% threshold is, as already we mentioned in the introduction, is definitely a good contribution towards this development. The announcement of an electoral alliance of the two by name communist parties came like a thunderbolt. At first glance, this alliance even appears to be rational. Both parties pretend a similar ideology. Many of their current leaders had once been united as young men during the Jana Andolan that led to the formation of the former CPN Marxist-Leninist, one of the precursor parties of the UML. For a longer time, the Maoist party presented itself as more radical, while the UML adopted more social democratic features. Today, the Maoist Center as well has distance from its earlier radical stance in many respects. But there is also little left of its earlier proclaimed commitment to the concerns of disadvantaged sections of society. At the same time, has the party adapted itself to the other mainstream parties in many respects, that is to say, in struggles over power, positions and privileges of its leaders have priority, ideological engagement is of less importance. The UML has gone through a similar development in the 1990s. I remember my conversations with UML leaders at that time. Immediately after the adoption of the 1990 constitution, they complained that the reforms had been incomplete, that there had been too many compromises with conservative forces. This sense as well has changed today. One of the current UML leaders gave a fiery speech at a conference of the German Nepal Friendship Association in Bonn in May 1990. It led the audience members sitting next to me to the remark, "This is the way revolutions are made." Since then, this politician and his whole party have changed their positions by and by towards an area that I would define as center-left. It, by this, forced the Congress, that originally had been founded as a social democratic party, to a more center-right position. The founding statute aspects that lead me to this view are found in traditional basic attitudes of Nepali politics. One example, the founding statute of the UML in January 1991 mentioned a clear statement for the abolition of monarchy. Contrary to this, the Congress only wanted to transform it into a constitutional monarchy. This itself was also a deviation from what Yala had claimed in the election campaign of 1959 when he announced that he would put the royal crown into the Nepalese museum. The Congress view of 1990 was more and more adopted by the real politic of the UML in the 1990s. It required a revolutionary party like the then CPN Maoists to cause this conservative national attitude to Dhoka. I have the impression that even today there are a number of politicians in both Congress and UML who want to turn back the clock and to reverse the essential achievements of Maoist insurgency and second Jana Andolan. Republic, secular state and federalism, for which so many people had to waste their lives. Against this background, I would like to call the electoral alliance of UML and the Maoist Center only as conditionally logical. At best, it is more rational than the previous coalition government of Congress and Maoist Center. I think that the decisive factor was less ideological similarity than power political calculation. None of the three big parties is currently in a situation to win an absolute majority in elections. The Maoist Center is even miles away from a good election result similar to that one of 2008, when it was backed by about 30% of the voters. Today, it is the smallest of the three big parties. It does not want to skip down even further, then is the election alliance with a party that has the best chances to win a relative majority in the current elections maybe the most optimal solution. This ensures the Maoist Center not only a special number of FPTP seats, but it also opens up chances for a power sharing after the elections. On the other side, does also the UML know that it alone will not win an absolute majority of seats. The agreement of both parties over the nomination of candidates in the constituencies raises the hopes of both parties to win at least a common absolute majority. The nomination of candidates already elucidated the problems of such electoral alliances. The situation was further complicated by the reduced number of possible FPTP seats for parliamentary elections. In 2008 and 2013, of course, each party could nominate 240 FPTP candidates. Now, UML and Maoist Center had to share just 165 such positions. The problem was a bit alleviated by the fact that they also had to share 330 FPTP candidacies for the elections to the provincial assemblies, but I have the impression that most of the top politicians still prefer a candidacy for the Patan Sala. On balance, UML and Maoist Center finally agreed on a common list of candidates, but there have been rumors among the second and third level of leaders of these parties. Some dissatisfied members even wanted to candidate as independents. I see this as a typical traditional intra-party struggles that have to be overcome on the way to a more reasonable party system. The struggle over tickets by the male politicians has further reduced the chances of women to be nominated as candidates, but this of course has basically also to do with the patriarchal party structures. The initial third partner of this alliance, Barbara Batarai's Nayan in Nepal, quickly fell by the wayside. Obviously, Batarai has completely miscalculated. The party has been routed in the local elections. I have the impression that more and more members turn their back on the party. The former Maoist chief ideologist's recent steering towards the Nepali Congress is absolutely irrational. It has simply been born out of the necessity after the UML and especially the Maoist Center refused to give Barbara the candidacy in his traditional constituency in Dhoka. And this brings me to the second electoral alliance that is dominated by the Nepal Congress. Without any doubt, the Congress has been caught unawares by the formation of an electoral alliance by its then partnering government, the Maoist Center, with the oppositional UML. I interpret the immediate formation of an alliance of democratic forces, as they have called it, as some kind of panic reaction. Generally, I have problems with the term democratic in this context. It suggests that the parties of the left alliance are not democratic. But what is the feature of a democratic party in Nepal? Which Nepali party can claim to be 100% democratic? All parties have, for example, big problems relating to democratic structures and processes. They have disregarded constitution, subordinate laws, and court decisions time and again. Some months ago, even the separation of powers has been challenged by top politicians. All parties lack an appropriate and unrestricted inclusion of all social groups at all party levels. All parties hardly participate in party base in the nomination of election candidates or other decisions. All parties have an unfathomable financial management. Most top politicians exhibit an incredible arrogance and overestimation of their importance and abilities. Time and again, the leading parties pay court to criminal and corrupt elements, include them in their highest party ranks, and support them as candidates in the elections. All parties present utopian manifestos ahead of elections, which they forget immediately after the elections have taken place. These are only a few examples that ask for a question mark, which is with respect to a democratic scene. I find the composition of the Democratic Alliance particularly questionable. The Congress did not have many options left in relation to an alliance. Therefore, it named the RPP and the Tarai parties as potential partners. I see the RPP parties as democratically extremely questionable. They are against the republic. They want a return of monarchy. They want to replace the secular state once again by the Hindu state, and finally they are against the federal state and want a return to the central state. In other words, these parties are actually completely unconstitutional if I compare them against the new constitution. They are ideologically arrested at another time and want to undo the few basic improvements bitterly bought with the blood of so many parties. How little this request of the RPPs reaches the population has been made clear not only by the local elections. That these parties continue to be indispensable is due to the fact that all three major parties have repeatedly involved RPP groups in their governments and have even made their leaders deputy prime ministers. I would therefore call the RPPs bad alliance partners of the Congress. The candidate list also showed that the Congress leaves these parties with only a very small share of the constituencies. The second group of parties the Congress has identified as potential alliance partners are the three major Tarai parties. Probably the smallest of these parties, the Nepal Forum of Gachada, has meanwhile even joined the Congress. Gachada and his followers had left in 2007. The two other Tarai parties, Sangya Samajwadi Forum and Rashtriya Janata Party in Nepal, were undecided. For the first ballot in late November, yesterday, this was less important, but at the latest, the nomination of the candidates for Province 2 made clear that the Congress and the two Tarai parties would not really come together. Although the Congress has won only 40 mayoral posts there in the local elections, and the two Tarai parties 51, and this without any alliance, the Congress saw itself also in Province 2 as the leading partner of this coalition. So the third alliance, that of Sangya Samajwadi Forum and Rashtriya Janata Party, may be a logical consequence. For the time being, the three alliances are pure electoral coalitions in the current provincial and parliamentary elections. The sole meaning is that the respective partners do not compete with each other in the constituencies over the FPTP positions. This plan largely seems to work. The fact that 2 of the 3 major parties have joined forces in the Left Alliance is likely to increase their chances with respect to the FPTP system enormously. The Congress may speak of a democratic alliance, but its partners are either insignificant or have been lost. This means that chances of the Congress are likely to drop. As a consequence, this means that the majority situation should shift, but the parties must also be aware of the fact that the alliance is only related to the FPTP seats. Under the proportional representation system, all parties still participate as single parties. What effect will the electoral alliances have on the voter behavior for the proportional representation system? Will they be able to understand the difference, especially with reference to the poor election education they have got? According to my opinion, the final perspectives of the parties are in the dark, despite the electoral alliances. Statements on this would be pure speculation at this time. At best, a historical look at the election results since 1991 is interesting. In 1991, thanks to the pure FPTP's election system, the Congress managed to win an absolute majority of seats with almost 40% of the vote. Even then, the party understood how to identify with Nepalese democracy. The only rudimentary democracy of the 1990s that had been ended in 1960 by the royal coup had been ended by the royal coup. In fact, in 1990, a democratic system had been introduced. It was logical consequence that the party that had already been elected by a majority of voters in 1959 returned to power. After that, however, there is a trend that shows constancy apart from the Constituent Assembly elections of 2013. The Congress was increasingly weakening while the left-wing parties got more and more support. Already in 1994, the Congress would win only a few more votes and seats than the UML. In 1999, the latter party would have clearly got the most votes and seats if it had not split before the elections. So the Congress would win an absolute majority of seats again. But it squandered this new chance in the following years, as we all know. The climax in the rise of the left parties came with the first Constituent Assembly elections, in which the Maoist party participated for the first time and became the relatively strongest party with almost 30% of the vote. All left parties together won more than 55% of the vote in 2008. Congress and UML showed only slightly recovered in the second CA elections, but benefited from the great losses of the Maoist party and above all their successes in the FPTP system. Altogether, the left-wing parties lost votes, but with over 40% of the vote, they still remained well ahead of the Congress that only got 25%. I think we must also consider this historic trend if we are to assess the possible consequences of the Left Alliance and its impact on the outcome of the elections. Please allow me some final remarks on the election system and some executive issues. First, I would like to mention once again that I see the significantly reduced number of MPs in the Pratinidhi Sabha compared to the Constituent Assembly as absolutely reasonable. My critics concern only the reversal of the relation of FPTP and PR seats. It prevents the urgently needed appropriate inclusion of all social groups, which nevertheless cannot be prevented by the non-inclusively composed party elites in the long run, I'm sure of that. Democratic election systems exist in many forms, no matter which system is used. There are minorities that have to bow to the will of majorities. Personally, I find that direct ballot systems, such as the one that is used in the United Kingdom, only partially reflect the will of the electorate. Until 1999, Nepal practiced a similar system in which a party with well below 40% of the vote repeatedly won an absolute majority of seats. For the constituent assembly elections, a mixed voting system was introduced that nevertheless could not really solve this mismatch. I find the system more democratic as we practice it in Germany, for example, where the percentage of seats in parliament corresponds to the proportion of votes received by the parties. Half of the seats are determined by a direct ballot system. A second vote fixes the percentage of seats parties will have in parliament. But in addition to the directly elected candidates, only so many parties from the party gain access to parliament from the party list of candidates as are needed to fulfill the percentage of seats of the party. Related to Nepal, I see the problem of such a system at the utmost in the socially inclusive design, but this is also not meant with the current system. Next, I find the minimum age of candidates, as it is prescribed by the Constitution, as irritating. Who wants to compete as a candidate in the parliamentary elections must be at least 25 years old. According to the 2011 census, about 55% of the population is younger than 25 years. The age group of 20 to 25 years alone accounts for 10% of the population. The future of Nepal lies in the hope on her youth. It needs to be given a much larger participation and greater responsibilities. The old generation of political leaders has already proved their failure abundantly. Finally, allow me some comments on the executive sector. Article 76 requires that the Council of Ministers may include a maximum of 25 persons, including the Prime Minister and the Ministers of State. Incidentally, there is only one single Deputy Prime Minister mentioned. 3 new governments have been formed after the new constitution came into force. The parties always invoked the transitional provisions of Article 298 and designated the utopian number of ministers, ministers of state and deputy ministers. The only meaning that I can see in such procedure is to safeguard governance, to satisfy the numerous party factions, and to participate as many MPs of the involved parties as possible to guarantee their access to public funds and privileges in the long run. From my point of view, only the government of late Sushil Kalala should have come under the transitional rule of the new constitution. All subsequent governments should have respected Article 76. When does the state want to start to dramatically reduce the number of ministries? Such restructuring requires a lot of time. At the moment, there are considerably more ministers than the number of persons that is allowed to sit in the Council of Ministers. Only one comparative figure in this context again. In developed and industrialized Germany, there are only 16 ministers, including the Chancellor. What will happen if a new Council of Ministers is to be formed after the elections to the Platinidi Summer in, let's say, January 2018? The number of ministries must have been reduced until then if the politicians do not want to violate the Constitution once again. This is part of what I understand under the rule of law. Nepal's politicians time and again violate against the Constitution and subordinate laws. They very often disregard decisions of the Supreme Court, even though these should be binding law in a democratic state. Over their endless power struggles, the so-called leaders forget their basic tasks for which they have asked to be elected. To implement the Constitution in every respect, to develop the country, to promote economy and infrastructure, to eliminate social inequalities, to provide justice to the victims of the insurgency, and to reconstruct the country after the earthquakes, only to mention a few things. I hope I have not bored you too much with my personal thoughts, and thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you, Karl, for that very comprehensive and analytical lecture. Now I would like to open the floor, but before I formally open the floor, I would like to request you to make your question brief, and please ask the questions which are related only to the lecture. And then we have some volunteers around there who will be helping you with the microphone. Okay.
Hello sir, my name is Kendra. I would like to ask you a question regarding this social inclusion. How do you see Nepal's political dimension with reference to class-based struggle rather than caste-based struggle?
Can you repeat your question?
How do you see Nepal's political dimension with reference to class-based struggle rather than caste-based struggle? Is class-based struggle necessary or caste-based struggle necessary for the overall development of the country? Please explain with Marxist point of view to meet the socio-political requirement.
Thank you. म एउटा रिक्वेस्ट पनि गरौँ है, तपाईहरु चाहिँ नेपालीमा प्रश्न सोध्न पनि सक्नुहुन्छ। I think Karl-ले पनि बुझ्नुहुन्छ होला, otherwise maybe तपाईलाई चाहिँ केही समस्या छ भने हामी हेल्प गर्न सक्छौँ। Thank you. अर्को क्वेशन एउटा
The lecture is very nice and brief as a writer, but one thing we must have analyzed about the chemistry of politics. Each chemistry Maoist and UNA will be affiliated in the long term or not. It is only the power struggle for the state capturing. I think these are the only shortest phenomena. Is it true?
Thank you, Karl. Would you like to answer two of the questions?
Yeah, maybe first to this question regarding social inclusion. I think that this has been responsible, the missing or not far-reaching social inclusion of the 1919 system has also been one of the reasons that the system could not last for long. There were a number of other shortcomings in the 1990 system. It has been for example, the Maoists who took this issue and made it their own, even though it was not originally their own. It had come from circles like Jana Andolan II or so, who already had very much criticized the missing social inclusion. And I think that the system that has been introduced with the elections to the Constituent Assembly would have been a good basis if it had been used in this way as it had been thought originally. But it had been more and more misused by the parties. I don't know if this answers your question. The other question you asked me for the consequence if these alliances have a long-term chance, or you have a similar question? Or? Yes, I think this is very difficult to say. At the moment, we must wait for the election results. And I could imagine, for example, that if this works well, for example, if you take the left alliance, if it works well with these elections, maybe they will find also to a greater unity, as they already have talked about. But nobody can see that at the moment. It can also be reversed if, for example, the Maoist party finds it will be on the losing string, maybe then it leaves this alliance. It's difficult to say now.
Thank you. Before I collect another round of questions, may I also request you to identify yourself and your organizations, if you will. That's you.
Thank you. My name is Norraj Lama, and I work with the university as an research associate for based in Kathmandu. And my questions is like, we have always experienced that there is always a miserable neighbor country, maybe India, in the political development of Nepal. So do you think that even there is some impact, the influence from our neighbor country for this coalition or not? If not, do you think that this coalition will, remain for a long time? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, sir. Get that right.
Thank you. Actually, I also was enlightened with the lectures. It was very much down to earth and academic. So thank you very much, and congratulations for Karl-Heinz Social Science Bar. I was just wondering, being an outsider and even as a long-time researcher, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Karl-Heinz Krämer. I'm an associate professor at the university. You are, I think you are not outsider because you have been researching on Nepal, on political party and political development for a long while. So quite often, since after these alliances have been forged, especially so-called Democratic Alliance and its leaders has been lamenting against the so-called Left Alliance that there will be a totalitarian dictatorship will be established since so-called Left Alliance will sweep over the election. Actually, being an academic, I don't believe that much because since even the Maoists has entered into liberal democracy since after CPA was signed in 2006. However, being a long-time researcher on Nepal, and an outsider, of course, insider as a researcher, how do you foresee, would there be happen, kind of like totalitarian dictatorship will be created after the Left Alliance will be probably swept over the election?
Okay, first, external influences. I don't think that there have been, it's not my opinion that there have been external influences on the formation of the current electoral alliances. I don't see any reason on that. Okay, it is often said the Congress is closer to India, and the name communists may suggest the other parties are closer to China, but I don't see any external influence on the formation of these alliances. I think this, as I have explained, they had to do with their own chances, which they have evaluated, and they saw that with such alliances, we have greater chances in the formation of a new government, or to winning a majority in the election. Yes, it's yeah, it's difficult to say. What are my critics was not in the alliance that has been formed by the Nepali Congress. It was only the term democratic that made the suggestions, the other are not democratic. And we had a government before of UML and Maoist, so why should this be a disaster for Nepal? We should have to wait, and I don't think that both of these parties are as radical as to transform Nepal to dictatorship, as is something sometimes called. And besides all, to arrange such fundamental changes, the government would lead the two-thirds majority, and it will not get it.
Thank you. Can we take some more questions?
My name is Raman Vishwa. I teach in National College. My question is, we are talking about various concepts. All of them are imported. All of them are imported concepts. Constitution was imported. Political parties were imported. And one of the funny things is, we have not been able to analyze how the imported concepts have been affected by our tradition and culture. That's the first thing. Second part is all the political parties are an organization, all right, but they have not been institutionalized as yet, even after 70 years. So, parties change their policy according to the leader. Whether it was BP, was one idea, where Girja comes, it becomes another. Now with Jalpa, it becomes another. So how do you consider political party or democracy or constitution as a stable concept?
So I think your question is related to the need for democratization within the party. Okay. Yeah, right. Yes, proceed.
Hello, my name is Divya Guru, and I work in the area of gender and social inclusion. Thank you very much for a very frank analysis. It's quite good to know that you analyze from gender and social inclusion perspectives. My question is, you said that the same thing has been repeated, the patriarchal mindset has been influenced even in the selection of candidates and in the whole election process. We've been working quite a lot, especially in the development field in this area. Do you think the whole system will be reinforced and the whole working in social inclusion will be even more difficult with the whole system just like, again repeating the same old thing? What would be the challenges for people like us or people like you all over in Nepal to work in the area of gender and social inclusion?
Namaste. My name is Jityaman. My question is, politicians are switching party, changing party for seeking the candidacy. And what implications it will have on institutionalizing the Federal Republic Constitution in Nepal? I mean to say that politicians are changing the party, like entering to another party to get candidacy. What implications it will have on implementing or institutionalizing the Federal Republic Constitution in Nepal?
Yeah, this was a very comprehensive question you have asked. Yes, it's you mentioned traditional culture of Nepal and what role it has to play in this context. I think when we are talking about social inclusion also, we must in the past, when I have worked on all this question of ethnic inclusion in Nepal, I had a lot of discussions with groups and organizations that felt not represented in what the state identifies with as its tradition and culture. And their argument was that Nepal is a multi-ethnic, a multilingual, a multicultural state, and it should be proud of this. And so I think Nepal must find a way to identify with this multiplicity of traditions and cultures. When we all find their home in Nepal, then the state will also have its future, also the identity of Nepal. Yeah. And your question was if this inclusion will it will.
I think your question was related to the kind of electoral alliances that has been formed and the kind of patriarchal norms that has been strengthened in the country. Will that have negative impacts on the social and gender inclusion issues?
Difficult to say. For the moment, I have the impression that if, for example, the participation of women is less than it has been under the Constituent Assembly, this can also have the effect that for a time this may also reduce the influence women have on the day-to-day politics. We must wait how it happens, and we must also see how many women are included through the proportional representation system. I've read in recent days that the share of women in the list of this system is higher, but if it is applied according to the rule, then only 50% of those candidates will really be included, will be women, and so the number is less. And for the inclusion of ethnic groups or regional groups, I also see not much advance. I see the current situation as a step back. This is my opinion.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
Yes, also asked on the social.
That was, I think, if I remember correctly, yes, the question was, there is a tendency among the political leaders that they choose political parties because of their self-interest in getting elected in the elections.
Yeah, this is a problem. I did not mention it in my lecture, but yes, this is also something that seems to be very strange, but in my view it has to do that they are simply most interested not in their values. They do not want to represent their values, they want their positions, their share of participation, and this is why they changed the parties.
Are there any other questions?
Could you speculate on the role of RPP or performance of RPP in the election?
Just speak in the mic.
You said RPP is in a way unconstitutional as a party, yet it performed very well in the second constitutional elections, and you want to speculate on
I will not say the party is unconstitutional, but the arguments it stands for, they are not based on what has been written in the new constitution. That is a problem for me. And I think in the local elections they have not much won, so I think this will not change. Also, in the elections to come, maybe they have some more chances in a few constituencies where they have a coalition with the Congress, and that may be possible, but it will be difficult.
More interested in the PR category, actually.
Sorry?
The proportional representation category.
Proportional representation category, and they need 3%, and in the 2013 elections, Karl-Heinz party had no FPPP seat. He must have one. If he has no one, it does also not mean anything if he gets 4 or 5%, but he will not get it. This is a problem for him.
Thank you. There's a question here.
I am Ravi Narendra Dewa from Kathmandu. Dr. Krämer has observed that the Democratic Alliance among Nepali Congress, RPP, and Manis-based parties seem less strong. With stronger left alliance, if the left run the country under communist dictatorship, is there any possibility that the NC would go into armed revolution like in 1951 and Nepal would become another Afghanistan?
Are there any other questions? Yeah.
My question is very short. What do you see the chances of left alliance? They are going for the party unification after the elections. So what is your observation that they will be chances of party unification of left alliance?
So both the questions were related to left alliance formations and
yeah. They will be a permanent alliance or party unification. What is the chances?
First, this question concerning the left alliance, I have argumented that there are, in the left alliance we have two of the big three parties together. So this, from the mere figure of results from the last elections and from the local elections, one can say they may have a greater chance to win, but I don't like to talk about the dictatorship that may be possible by these parties. There's also not, I don't see why there should be another armed revolution. Even the Maoist center is far away from this. Maybe there are some small groups like that of Nepal and Chandra, so who still show a radical tune, but I don't think that the Maoist center as such will have in mind any militant revolution. This is not the future of Nepal, I don't think so. And the people will also not like it, and they will. In the 1990s, for some years, the party got more and more support from sections of the society that felt not to be a part of the country. They felt to be left alone. For example, in the areas where the Maoist insurgency started, in Dhoka and so on. And I think this has changed. You can also see it now from the elections that participation or so that has yesterday been shown. I don't think that there will be any danger for a militant revolution.
I hope your prediction will come true. Thank you so much.
The second question was something related to will the current alliance building between CPN, UML and the Maoists will end up in the unification of the party.
Okay. That is what has been claimed recently by the parties, and they even said they want to unite even before the elections. I see it as nonsense. This is talk by the politicians, as it often happens. It will depend. Maybe it can lead to such development, but I'm personally I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Okay, there is one question left. The last question.
Thank you, Karl, for your presentation. My question is, what do you see the challenges after the left, if in case the leftist coalitions got majority votes and then it forms a government? What do you see the major challenges it could happen?
Are there any questions? I can take one or two more. We have 5 minutes. Okay.
My opinion, federalism is, in my opinion, federalism is, I think, it is very costly for countries like Nepal. What do you have to say about on it? Okay.
I think this is very difficult. I already mentioned in my talk that I cannot, I do not want to make any suggestions what may be the result of the election. I don't know. I only have some impressions, and this is that the left have a chance, a better chance in the FDP system. But what will be with the PR system? I cannot say, and so it's also not sure that they will win an absolute majority, those parties together. So we must wait, and this is simply the situation. And that was on
the next question was something related to how feasible is federalism. He thinks that it will be costly for it.
Yeah, of course, it's a costly system. But I think from the view of costs, yeah, you are right. This is maybe too expensive for Nepal. But on the other side, it gives a chance for the regions of the country. So far, Nepal has been always ruled very centrally. And if there is a greater decentralization by this federal system, I think this gives also the chance to the outer regions of the country. So maybe we must see both.
Thank you, Karl. In the end, I would like to thank Dr. Karl for coming to the lecture, to deliver your lecture. And I would also like to thank all of you for finding some time to come to the event today. Lastly, on behalf of Social Science Baha, we have small token of love for Karl. So